Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Wimpkin. I would like to report on a pretty significant problem that I noticed while we were researching. And while I was doing my researching, I was also able to kind of relate it to my classroom and really think about what I was doing in the classroom that kind of was adding to this problem. And I thought that this would be something that would be really, really important to kind of dive further into and research and see how we could use cultural responsive teaching to really target this and really make like a decline in what's going on. So the topic that I picked was overclassification, so cultural diverse students being overclassified. And I don't just mean academically, but what I really noticed was students who are culturally diverse also being classified with emotional behavior disorders. And so the statement, or kind of what I was noticing the problem to be, was there's this misalignment between the cultural norm of the child or the student and what our traditional academic public schools kind of force our students into this, perfect little box, which we know, academically they all have different needs. And that's very true when it comes to different cultural backgrounds. So just talking about that misalignment. Also, as I was looking into my research, I came up with this graph that you see on the screen right here, right underneath my problem statement. And it was how the different demographics or the different backgrounds of teachers. And in today's school, at least I know it's true in my school, most of our teachers are predominantly white females. We do have two males in our schools. Again, they are white males, but there really is there's not a big diversity in the teaching pool, at least in my school for sure. Also, that kind of leads then to a misinterpretation of what the culture is and how their communication styles are coming across. And because we have this philosophy when we're in our classrooms of how we feel our classroom should function, we can kind of take their communication style and kind of represent it as it being a defiant behavior, which is then something that we then start labeling, and that's something really important to kind of look into too, of that label. So, they're relying the labels, the emotionally disturbed, emotionally behavioral disorders, really are relying on observations in the classroom, and that's kind of it, which can become subjective, which then leads us to putting in our own personal bias of what we feel is a behavior that is not our typical behavior in a classroom. So we want to really look at also the evaluations. I noticed some of the problems are with evaluating students and classifying them because they're so standard based, and we kind of force it into, if it's this, then it's this, or if it's this, it's not this. So the significance of this problem, though, is the disciplinary actions that are happening because of the behavioral concern. So when we start removing students from a classroom, that impacts them negatively in two areas. One, academically, because now they are missing that instruction from their teacher that they are required to get. So there's that free and appropriate education that's now being impacted because of the removal of that student. And also the social component of it. So they're being the way they're being compared to their peers. And so what I noticed was we have federal guidelines, of course, in all of our states, and including New Jersey, and one of them being IDEA. And we have to always look at the child and say, okay, how can I give them that free and appropriate education the best way I can? And if we start misclassifying students based on cultural backgrounds that we just aren't familiar with as that educator or district or administration, then we are doing a disservice. And then that does kind of break that federal guideline of now we are not giving that child a free and appropriate education. We are also allowing a label to form, which is detrimental to a child. So not only are we labeling them as the educator, but we're also allowing their peers to label them. So when we're constantly removing them from the classroom, we're kind of saying, hey, that behavior does not fit in our room. You are not part of our community right now. And that really kind of isolates them from the general population. And so even though we might not be saying to them in the moment, hey, you're a bad kid, we are definitely visualizing and making it very apparent to their peers and to us that, hey, you are not welcome here, which can then lead to, lots of intense emotional dysregulation. So anxiety, depression, now they feel isolated because really in their culture, at their home environment, they're saying, this is normal for me. This is how I communicate. This is what I've been taught to do. And it's just not matching up with our classroom expectation. So that is a huge problem. And I really think the cultural responsive teaching framework could really allow these students to feel accepted and feel a part of our classroom. So what we have here is some current trends. And so what's going on right now is I have a graph here on underneath my current trend blog, and it says African American students are up to 2 times more likely to be classified compared to their white peers. That's pretty significant. And that research is showing that negative behaviors are sometimes stemming from the classroom environment. How is my teacher accepting me into this group? How are my peers accepting me into this group? And if we have these biases of what a typical classroom should be, then a diverse communication style that's different from what I'm used to, that's really going to impact them, because that's going to kind of like isolate them from me. And I'm not doing it in my words, but my actions are definitely going to show. So I believe that the CRT, the cultural responsive teaching framework, has been developed to really target these this negative, impact. So with that, we want to try and make sure we're engaging them in a collaborative way, using their background to really help kind of drive their learning. The barriers that I noticed, I kind of reviewed a little bit before, but the barriers that I noticed is that educators are just not feeling prepared to address or manage students with diverse backgrounds. We're not knowledgeable in all of those backgrounds. We don't know what their norms are at home. We really only know kind of what's going on in our walls of our classroom and what our expectations are. So because of that, that can of course, really impact. So I also felt like when I was doing my research, another thing that came up was that teachers were not fully understanding what the CRT framework looked like and how to implement it, which if you are not comfortable with that and you aren't really kind of buying into its philosophy yet, you're going to create a lot of gaps, and educators are going to create a lot of gaps, and then it's really not going to work as effectively as it's designed to do. Also, what I noticed was you also have admin and district. Are they on board with the full philosophy of how CRT works in a classroom? Because if they aren't fully prepared or knowledgeable of it, they're not going to be able to best support the teachers in implementing this framework, which, there you go again, it's gonna build a lot of gaps. So it's really, really important that schools that are bringing in this type of teaching or these strategies are fully prepared for that. So this kind of led me to future research in as we really need to look at our schools' standard-based assessments. So how are students being evaluated, and are those evaluations reliable for students with diverse backgrounds? Are they meeting certain criteria that would also bring into consideration their typical norms? I think also a big thing is words can really be powerful. And so for me here presenting this really important topic of really looking at acceptance for culturally diverse students. But sometimes words aren't enough. And so I think what needs to be looked at is those numbers, the data. Is CRT, after the school or the teacher or the classroom has implemented this framework, is the data supporting or showing that there is this decrease in behaviors and that there's an increase in engagement? The reduction of removing students from a classroom, has that been eliminated or decreased in the amount of times? And that disciplinary action, so expulsion, suspension, things like that. And so I think when numbers and graphs like you see here on my screen, I think when teachers can see that, that is very apparent. That's very clear for them, right? We know numbers. And so I would hope my words would be enough to kind of like motivate everybody to know that this is a really significant problem and we really need to overcome it. But I know that words aren't enough. And so I think that's really important, is to really dive into the data, into the numbers. So I think it's also imperative that we are bringing families into this, because again, we come from our own background, we come from our own culture, we have our own values, we have our own way of communicating and doing things. So it's important that we kind of put that personal judgment or those biases aside and really allow these families who are from those diverse backgrounds to come in and kind of give us a workshop. I feel like when we bring families into the learning, that collaboration and that communication really is so strong, and it allows parents to feel like they are a part of their children's learning. And so if we I know we're experts in education, but we're not experts in everything. And so when we allow families to feel like they're the expert, and they get to come in and kind of give us a lesson on something, I think that's really valuable for them. It really brings that sense of community together, school and the town that you're working in. So I hope you felt the same way as me reading this. I hope you dive a little bit into your own research as to how you can make your classroom as culturally accepting as you can. Something that I did note, I actually didn't have it in this presentation, but something that I did note was it's also not about just bringing different cultural books into the classroom. These kids already know about their background in the most authentic way that a book cannot teach them. They are getting it from their family already. So even though we have these books that we can bring into the classroom and they feel accepting, it's really a lot deeper than that, than just books in our library. So I know I have them, and I'm one of the barriers. I'm one of the people that I'm like, well, this is what a classroom looks like, and this is how I'm supposed to be doing it. But after doing this research and kind of my path that I'm going into for the child study team, I definitely will be doing more research into this of how I can bring more inclusivity into the classrooms that I'm case managing, and bringing those families that I'm case managing into the classroom so that they do feel a part of it. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to any of your discussions when I see them on the thread. So again, thank you for your time.